The legend that is Marilyn Monroe, Hollywood's biggest star of the 1950s, nothing short of iconic.
We've known her since we were little. She represents the image of the ideal woman, beautiful and a bit perfect.
To fit that ideal and wear one of Marilyn's most famous gowns, Kim Kardashian had to lose around 7 kilos.
Marilyn Monroe is a global legend. There's no country in the world where she hasn't had the same kind of impact that she had during her lifetime.
She was an icon, but she was also made for the industry, so she changed herself.
On June 1st, 2026, Marilyn Monroe would have turned 100 years old. Exhibitions around the world are honoring her birthday, including in Paris. Several new books mark the occasion, such as the curated anniversary work Marilyn Monroe 100, featuring shots by acclaimed 20th century photographers. Her legacy lives on past her untimely death at the age of 36, under circumstances that were never fully explained.
Marilyn Monroe was often cast as a dumb blonde, so people quickly began to confuse her real self with her roles.
Today, it's understood that she was much more than that. She represents issues that are still highly relevant: self-determination, mental health, and control over one's image.
I knew who Marilyn Monroe was because of what I was told she was. But as I was reaching her, I found a beautiful, intelligent human being that wanted to be respected, that was such a feminist.
100 years after she was born, a fresh perspective on Marilyn Monroe. She was born in Los Angeles on June 1st, 1926, and christened Norma Jean Baker. Growing up between foster families and orphanages, her childhood was unstable. A mother suffering from mental illness and an absent father. She experienced abuse and sexual violence as a teenager. This early experience of insecurity fueled a fear of abandonment, a need for attention, but also the determination to make something of herself. She was first discovered by a photographer in 1944, working in a munitions factory during World War II. He was immediately struck by her charm. She found early success as a pinup model, but Norma Jean wanted more. She wanted to be an actress and began working with an agent. By the late 1940s, she was still far from famous, landing only minor roles and struggling to be noticed. Her first film appearances were small and often uncredited. Her alias was part of a carefully crafted Hollywood image. To the studios, Norma Jean sounded just a little too ordinary. The name Marilyn was chosen for her. Monroe she chose herself, her mother's maiden name.
No, 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 no.
And so she became Marilyn Monroe, catchy, confident, and perfect for movie posters. Hollywood manufactured stars, turning Marilyn Monroe into one of its most famous faces. The studio crafted an entirely new look for her. Bleached hair, new makeup, clothing, body language. They even altered her hairline to reframe her face. From then on, she was consistently typecast.
But diamonds are a girl's best friend.
You have to know that the film industry operated on a typecasting system. That means certain actors were associated with certain roles, and for Marilyn Monroe, it was very often a sort of extension of the pin-up image, the dumb blonde. But of course she wasn't a dumb blonde, she was much more than that. The studios heavily emphasized her supposedly very unhappy childhood, growing up in an orphanage, the supposedly abusive mother, the absent father. That was a way to present Hollywood as this young woman's savior out of poverty. And also to glorify the American dream. So this narrative of sadness and hardship became part of the Marilyn legend.
So who was the real woman behind the legend? Hollywood turned Marilyn into a star, bringing her success and fame. But it came at a high price. The studio system left no space for self-determination. The movie Niagara marked a significant milestone in her career, elevating her to international fame.
Kiss me, hold me tight.
The movie featured Monroe as a ruthless wife and femme fatale, a genuine character role in a melodramatic film noir. Marilyn wanted more, and she worked hard to get it. Even as a global star, she took acting lessons, read avidly, and studied her roles obsessively. In 1954, she founded Marilyn Monroe Productions Incorporated, a radical step for a woman in the 1950s. She wanted to choose her own projects, to shape and produce more sophisticated material. As a result, she was labeled difficult.
By the early 1950s, after working hard on her public image, she tried to break free from it. She demanded access to more diverse and complex roles. She succeeded, but it was tough.
Marilyn found a very good director in Billy Wilder. She chose to work with him and also tried to work with Laurence Olivier. At the same time, she collaborated with John Huston. And at a certain point, Marilyn Monroe also became a producer. In other words, she tried to maintain creative control over her films, going beyond just being an actress, beyond the script, beyond the project itself. So yes, there is clearly an evolution. She was a good actress, but in the beginning, she had to fulfill the role the industry demanded. The dumb blonde, the sexy blonde, and so on. But then there comes a point when Marilyn turns things around, and she takes advantage of working with Billy Wilder. In The 7-Year Itch, she becomes this almost ethereal figure, the upstairs neighbor who disrupts the protagonist's moral equilibrium. And suddenly you see her differently, with a new sensitivity, in a completely different light.
A romantic comedy as the backdrop for one of film's most iconic images. Marilyn Monroe over a subway grate, her white dress billowing. The scene was shot outdoors and the press informed, drawing a crowd of 3,000 onlookers. Ultimately, the scene had to be reshot in studio because of all the commotion. Still, the images swept the globe. For Marilyn's private life, it was a disaster. She'd recently married baseball player Joe DiMaggio, her second husband, who grew intensely jealous of the crowds during the shoot. He hated seeing other men ogling his wife. The marriage hit breaking point during production, and Marilyn filed for divorce. 1954 proved a fateful year. While Hollywood perfected her public image with The 7-Year Itch, her private life shattered. But her desire to be taken seriously as an actress was reinforced elsewhere, too. In February 1954, Marilyn Monroe traveled to Japan. She was enlisted by the U.S. military to boost morale among the troops. Following the 1953 armistice, tens of thousands of American soldiers were stationed in Korea. The visit was spontaneous, and Marilyn eagerly accepted the opportunity for a role outside of the tightly scripted world of Hollywood. She wanted to do something for her fans and experienced something completely new, a live connection with her audience. Over 4 days, she performed 10 shows for up to 100,000 soldiers to massive success. Despite freezing temperatures, she performed in a light evening gown, prompting a bout of pneumonia. Still, the tour gave her strength. In 1955, she moved to New York to study under Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio. It was a rebellion against the studio system. She renegotiated her contract, demanding more input on her roles. What's more, she began to use her fame to take a stand. Jazz icon Ella Fitzgerald was barred from performing in major clubs due to racial prejudice, but Marilyn stepped in. She told the top venue, "Book Ella, and I will sit in the front row every single night." The press showed up, the club was packed, and Ella Fitzgerald's career skyrocketed. Marilyn Monroe proved once again she knew exactly how to leverage her popularity. She instinctively understood how power worked. And today, it's this facet of her personality that is widely celebrated.
She was anti a lot of things that at the time was just a big no-no, especially with the racial division. She did not like that a lot at all. She was very against it, and that's why she wanted to be an advocate.
Marilyn suffered painful abandonment and heartbreak several times, starting in childhood, and all kinds of abuse. So when she finally gained power, when she was able to speak up and express herself, she consistently spoke out in support of causes that seemed only logical. And of course, Marilyn Monroe was a woman who admired and supported other women, and who stood behind the changing image of women in the 1950s.
But Hollywood showed little interest in the new Marilyn Monroe. Power struggles and contract disputes followed. And the more control she gained, the more she clashed with the system. The intense method acting techniques she learned at the Strasberg studio were as powerful as they were dangerous. She drew heavily on her own emotions, but without the inner stability that required. Her marriage to playwright Arthur Miller also ended in divorce. Her childhood traumas had caught up with her, and her mental health suffered. She frequently arrived hours late to movie sets. Caught in a cycle of self-doubt, she constantly feared she wasn't good enough, relying heavily on tranquilizers just to sleep. At the same time, heavy drinking impaired her concentration, causing her to forget lines.
Obviously, Marilyn Monroe was an inexhaustible source of characters. But Billy Wilder, John Huston, and many of the directors who worked with her sometimes struggled, because Marilyn was often in a very vulnerable emotional state. She didn't always show up on time. She often arrived on set extremely late, not having learned her lines, and she could seriously delay the shooting schedule. But in the end, she was Marilyn Monroe, and everyone knew they had to put up with it.
But despite her absences and private turmoil, Marilyn pushed on. It seems almost everything has been said about Marilyn Monroe, but one aspect of her final years offers fresh insights. In the early 60s, she visited Mexico multiple times, surprising local journalists by giving interviews in Spanish. While officially there to buy furniture, jewelry, and handicrafts, unofficially, Mexico meant much more.
I don't know if this is the right moment to tell the story of Marilyn Monroe's famous Mexican adventure. But her last marriage was to a man named Arthur Miller, one of the great American playwrights. That brought her into contact with a whole circle of cultural and intellectual figures. At a certain point, a Mexican photographer and filmmaker named José Bolaños invited her to Mexico. So in 1962, Marilyn Monroe arrived there, wearing a stunning, form-fitting green dress. José Bolaños was by her side the whole time. She met many of the intellectuals of that era, visited the home of El Indio Fernández, where she shared some tequila with him. She also visited the Churubusco studios, where The Exterminating Angel by Luis Buñuel was being filmed, and that's where she met Buñuel himself.
Marilyn dreamed of independent filmmaking in Mexico. There's evidence she was pursuing a project with Spanish director Luis Buñuel, a key figure in surrealist cinema. He represented the antithesis of Hollywood commercialism, creating films full of ruptures, enigma, and artistic complexity. Mexico's intellectual circles welcomed Marilyn as an artist.
They didn't treat her like a sexualized bombshell. They treated her like a human being, just like with talent. You have these goals and aspirations. You're respecting our culture. You're here because you want to work with us. We want to work with you. How amazing would it be to work with Marilyn Monroe? Burnell invited her on set for that reason, not just to see what it's like, and it's very much the same. He was a very respected, filmmaker, and that's why she wanted to work with him. So she wanted to see, this is how you work. I love it. What can we do together?
The projects in Mexico never came to fruition. Marilyn's last film was completed in Hollywood in 1961, The Misfits. The screenplay was written by her soon-to-be ex-husband, Arthur Miller. The marriage fell apart during filming. Soon after, the world's eyes were on Marilyn once more. In May 1962, she sang Happy Birthday to President Kennedy at Madison Square Garden. A historic moment steeped in both Hollywood glamour and scandal. Marilyn died just a few weeks later, on August 4th, 1962, suddenly and shockingly. To this day, her death remains shrouded in mystery. All sorts of theories have been put forward, including speculation that she was murdered. According to the autopsy report, however, she died from an overdose of sleeping pills. Fame came at a high price: depression, insomnia, addiction. What she needed was compassion. But instead, her body, her mental state, her struggles were all treated as gossip fodder. She lived her life in the full glare of the public eye. One of the first global icons onto whom people projected their fantasies and dreams, long before social media began mass-producing celebrities.
She was a person who was profoundly abused by the entertainment industry. By producers, by famous actors, even by her own co-stars. In her vulnerability, Marilyn often fell into their hands. And there was also a form of abuse coming even from American politics. So in the end, I don't think we ever saw the best of Marilyn in terms of her acting. I believe that would have come later. But what we do have, what remains, is still an extraordinary achievement for a woman in a world of sharks like Hollywood was then and still is to this day.
We could still see her humanity. Like I said, she was ahead of her time, and we don't talk enough about how ahead of her time she was.
She embodies many things at once. A very strong, determined woman who achieved immense fame and financial independence. And yet, at the same time, she was often objectified, for men and by men. So she remains a deeply ambivalent figure.
Now, 100 years after her birth, we see Marilyn Monroe in a new light. Not only as an actress whose life ended in tragedy, but as a woman and artist who wanted to be taken seriously. One who played a major role in becoming the icon she is today. She created this image herself, but at some point lost control over it. Marilyn Monroe could never escape the public gaze. But perhaps it's time to stop asking what broke her, and instead focus on what she showed us. That attention can be challenging, and it's crucial to recognize when it crosses personal boundaries. What do you think about Marilyn Monroe? Let us know in the comments.